All right, let's dive right in. What if I told you that the grammar you use every single day isn't just about where to put a comma? What if it's the actual operating system your brain uses to build reality? We're going to explore this wild idea that grammar is the hidden logic behind, well, everything. Here's the best way to think about it. Our language is like a musical score, and grammar, that's the structure. It's the notes, the timing, the harmony. And just like with music, that score pretty much rigidly determines the sound that we perceive as meaning. This one idea is going to be our guide as we break all this down. So, this begs a massive question, right? When we were learning grammar in school, were we just memorizing a bunch of boring, tedious rules? Or were we actually learning the very blueprint our minds use to put together a logical picture of the world around us? To even begin to answer that, we have to start with the basics, the notes in our linguistic music. And that means we need to start seeing events, things like running, thinking, building, not as these vague actions, but as concrete, logical objects that our language can actually grab onto and manipulate. For a long time, formal logic was kind of stuck. It couldn't really handle simple action sentences. But then, in 1967, this philosopher, Donald Davidson, he published a paper that just sparked a total revolution. His idea was so simple, but it was profound. Sentences about actions are actually referring to real, concrete events. And that single insight, it gave birth to this entire field we now call modern event semantics. So what is event semantics? Well, it's this theory that says we should treat actions and processes as events, basically as things we can handle just like objects. You know how you can count 3 apples? This framework lets logic count an event of running, and all of a sudden we could describe and analyze actions with this incredible new precision. Okay, let's see this in action. Take a sentence that seems super simple on the surface. The chef prepared the meal. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? But logically, our grammar is doing some serious heavy lifting in the background. See, your brain doesn't just hear a random string of words. It makes a series of logical claims. First, it establishes that, yep, an event of preparing actually existed. Second, it nails down the agent of that event, that's the chef. And third, it specifies that the object that got affected by all this was the meal. It's a complete quantifiable event, all neatly packaged in one little sentence. So, we've got our notes, these logical events. But of course, a bunch of notes on their own don't make music, right? We need rules for how to put them together. And that brings us to grammar's rules of composition, or if we stick with our metaphor, the rules of harmony. Now, this all works because of a core principle in linguistics called compositionality. It's this idea that the meaning of a sentence isn't just some random mashup. No, it's systematically built from 2 key things: the meaning of the words themselves and the grammatical rules you use to combine them. It's a predictable process, almost like math. To really get this, you have to see the 2 sides of language. On the one hand, you've got syntax. That's the surface stuff, the word order you can actually see and hear. Think of it as the phenotype. But on the other hand, you have semantics. That's the deep, abstract, logical meaning that the syntax is trying to create. That's the good stuff. This is where thinking of grammar as a logical calculator really helps. It takes individual word meanings as the inputs, it applies a super strict set of rules, its functions, and it computes one final, precise logical output. 2 plus 2 always equals 4. And in the same way, the dog plus barked always computes to a very specific logical meaning. So let's actually watch this calculator work. We have 2 parts: the noun phrase, the dog, and the verb, barked. Right now, they're just 2 separate ideas floating around. So how does our grammar combine them into a single, coherent thought? Okay, here's where the magic happens. The grammatical rule doesn't just glue the words together, it actively introduces the logical concept of an event, what linguists call the event argument. And in that one instant, the grammar constructs the final thought. An event of barking happened, and the agent of that barking was the dog. The syntax is literally building the semantics from the ground up. And this is where things get really cool. If grammar is the score that creates the logic, what happens when different languages have different scores? Do they end up creating different kinds of logical music? I mean, this is one of the biggest, juiciest questions in all of linguistics. If the grammatical blueprint is different from one language to the next, does that mean that speakers of those languages are actually building their understanding of the world in fundamentally different ways? We don't even need to look at different languages to see this at work. Just look at English. If I say, the destroying of the city, our grammar forces our brain to focus on the ongoing process. But if I make one tiny little change and say, the destruction of the city, the entire logical focus shifts to the final result. It's the same event, but a different grammatical blueprint creates a totally different mental picture. Now let's compare two languages. In English, to ask a question, we have to move the question word, like what, all the way to the front of the sentence. But in Chinese, the question word, 什么, stays right where the answer would go. The surface structure is completely different.
So does that mean the underlying logic is different? Well, probably not. Researchers think that while the surface grammar, the phonogrammar, is different, the deep logical machinery, the tectogrammar, is actually strikingly similar. Both languages are doing the exact same logical work, just with different tools. It's like the instruments are different, but the underlying harmony is the same.
Okay, so let's put this final piece of the puzzle into place. We have our logical notes, the events. We have the rules of harmony, that's the grammar that combines them. So when you put it all together, what have you actually built? It means the grammar you learned as a kid is so much more than just a tool for communication. It is a formal, incredibly powerful logical system. It is the blueprint your mind uses to construct a coherent interpretation of every single event you see, describe, and think about. It really is a system where the grammar uses its formal structure, its rules, its syntax, as the direct blueprint for building meaning, for constructing that semantic object inside our heads. So if you remember just 3 things from all this, make it these. Number 1, grammar is the engine that systematically builds logical meaning. 2, the big breakthrough was treating events as concrete objects that we can actually analyze. And 3, different languages give us different, totally fascinating blueprints for describing the exact same world. And ultimately, it all comes down to this: one single unified system. A powerful interface connecting the structure of our words to the logic of our thoughts, all of it working together seamlessly to create the world we understand. Which really just leaves us with one final thing to think about. If your language truly is the musical score that dictates the logic of your thoughts, what kind of music are you creating with it every single day?